Streets filled with smoke, tear gas, and crowd control munitions. For months, there have been sporadic clashes between federal officers and protesters outside Portland's ICE facility. So what's going on here? Who are these officers? And have they crossed the line? Demonstrations against President Trump's immigration policies began in early June and have largely been peaceful. The protests have been focused here, at the ICE facility in South Portland. It sits away from downtown, in the South Waterfront neighborhood. The building is leased by the federal government and protected by the Department of Homeland Security, a job normally done by the Federal Protective Service. But on the ground, we've also seen teams of officers from other agencies called upon to support FPS in what's known as cross-designation. There have been specially trained units, including U.S. Border Patrol BORTAC, a special response team from ICE, along with officers from the Bureau of Prisons. Most nights follow a familiar pattern. Officers emerge from the front gate, then push out in a U-shape or wedge formation, clearing the way for vehicles to enter or exit the ICE building. Although protesters are sometimes antagonistic, video appears to show officers at times responding with disproportionate force. On October 2nd, Leilani Payne stood in front of officers on the street after they cleared the exit, allowing a car to leave the property. She complied, but after the 19-year-old shouted insults and swore at the officers, one of them blasted her with chemical spray in the face. Payne said she had trouble breathing, burning in her eyes, ears, and throat. In some instances, federal officers appeared to attack when there was no apparent threat. Videos show protesters who crossed the blue line marked U.S. Government Do Not Block were tackled by a team of officers. On August 13th, protester Darren Hertzberg was standing outside the driveway when a federal officer tackled him from behind. Smoke was deployed. Hertzberg said he was taken into custody and cited for failure to comply. Homeland Security policy allows officers to use force only when no reasonably effective, safe, and feasible alternative exists. And they can only use a level of force that is objectively reasonable. On several nights, the policy appeared to be tested. Officers blanketed the street with smoke and tear gas, used flashbangs, pepper balls, and other less-than-lethal munitions. Their actions often seemed to make the situation worse, instead of calming it down. On October 18th, a large crowd of peaceful protesters gathered outside the ICE facility following a No Kings rally. KGW zoomed in and slowed the video. It showed a federal officer who fired a less-than-lethal round into the ground, ricocheting toward the ICE building. That triggered federal officers to deploy tear gas on the crowd. The intent of tear gas is dispersal, but misuse or abuse can cause injuries or inflame tensions even more. As of mid-November, federal court records indicate 36 people have been charged with crimes related to the ICE facility in Portland since June. Some of those cases involved assaults on federal officers, arson, and property damage. Federal law gives U.S. Homeland Security broad authority to protect federal buildings, with no clear limit on how far off-site officers can operate. For example, this video showed a team of federal officers walking away from the ICE building to make an arrest on September 30th. They marched down the street and out of camera view. At the same time, Homeland Security has used helicopters and drones to circle overhead, frustrating neighbors and inflaming tensions. The conflict over immigration policy and attempts by President Trump to deploy National Guard troops help mobilize a new strategy among protesters: inflatable costumes. But even those in costume have faced off with federal officers. On October 2nd, Seth Todd said he was peacefully protesting in a frog suit when an officer aimed chemical spray directly at his costume's air vent. Protesters and local officials accused the federal government of abusing its authority. Similar complaints were made during the 2020 racial justice protests in Portland, which centered around the federal courthouse. A government audit found that many of those federal officers deployed to Portland in 2020 were not sufficiently trained or prepared for the operation. Many of the same border and security forces have returned to Portland, this time to protect the ICE building. The Federal Protective Service was created to protect public buildings. Now the question is, who's protecting the public?